Hey, hello everyone. I'm Heather McManus from the Designers Collaborative. Thank you so much for being here. We have a really great webinar today with Melissa Clark from MC Virtual Assistants and Megan Cochran, who is a virtual assistant. And she happens to be our virtual assistant. So I can share like personal experience on this one. So our topic for today is, are you ready for a virtual assistant? So that is, something that I think we do internally when we're running our businesses and we're like, okay, I've reached the point where I think I'm ready. But then there's the other part. So we're going to hear from what it's like from a virtual assistant, from their point of view, are whether or not you actually are ready. So this is going to be a really good conversation. And if we can, we will answer questions as we go along. If it seems like it works with the flow of things, otherwise we'll definitely be answering questions at the end. So thank you so much for joining, Melissa and Megan. And why don't you kick it off?
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Heather. Yes, so excited to be here today. So yes, I'm Melissa from MC Virtual Assistants, and Megan is a virtual assistant on our team. She is also our client success manager. So Megan has first-hand experience, on the VA side, working with clients and knowing what the VAs need for successful partnership. And also, on the client side, kind of what we can do to help you be ready to actually work with a VA. So I think we've kind of broken it down into sort of different categories. We see this being just a fluid conversation. So yes, if you have questions just as we go, please feel free to shout up. But the first thing I think that's key when I kind of first speak to designers, often they seem to have an idea of what it is that they need help with. And that's great, but there's many things that go into, are you ready to work with a VA? So I think the first key point, Megan, is, operations and processes and systems. So, do you have any sort of processes in place? Because if you don't know, how can you expect somebody else to know?
Yes,
you don't know what your process is. How can you expect a VA to know or to tell a VA what your process is? So Megan, I'll let you kind of embellish on that.
Yes, absolutely. And that is one of the issues whenever I check in with MCVA clients. Several of the clients, they voice a concern. They're like, I don't know what to delegate. I don't know how to delegate. And my first question is always, okay, do you have processes in place? Is your operations, do you have everything in place? Do you know what you want to delegate? Do you know what you don't like to do in your business? So having those processes in place and knowing what you do and do not like to do within your business is a great start of working with a VA.
So, I think often designers have a process. They just don't realize they have a process.
Exactly.
It's all up here.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
it would be like telling a stranger how to get to your house. You drive there every single day and you don't think about it. You just, your car, like you could be thinking about a million things that's not even like concentrating on the road, because we're capable of doing that. Like we're breathing and our heart's beating at the same time and we're totally fine. It's like you don't know exactly how to tell someone until you have to sit down and think about that. And for a virtual assistant to be successful in what you're asking them to do, they need some steps. They need to start here and do this. And then if there's a question, of course, you guys, are there to be like, okay, there's a blank spot here. So what do we do for that?
Yes, exactly. And, I have onboarded new clients and they have nothing in place. And it does, as a VA, it makes it harder to know how to deliver those deliverables how the designer would like without a process. Just knowing those steps, it helps us, and it helps the working relationship between, a VA and a designer.
Mm-hmm. So then would you say that that person who doesn't know their steps, doesn't have anything written down, hasn't really thought about it yet, they're just sort of in the overwhelm, would you say that that person is ready, where you could take them on and teach them how to get there? Or should they kind of take a beat, set some things up, think about what it is, and then reach out to you guys for hiring? What would you say on that?
I would say again, this kind of moves a little bit into the kind of delegation role. I think sometimes it's like looking at it as a big picture. It's like, just as you say, Heather, that overwhelm. Like it's just too much. Like, I don't know where to start. And I think it's then really kind of being able to narrow down like a handful of tasks, whether it be, marketing. I need somebody just to help take, the newsletters off on my plate, or I really need
Start
help
somewhere. Yeah.
getting products into design files or whatever it is and creating proposals, because that is time consuming for me, clipping all the products, getting all the item descriptions in there. It's all on the website. I know that I like to include the finish, the dimensions, that whatever it is that they want to see on the client facing proposal. But that is just time consuming, but there is a process there. They have they might have that information initially on a spreadsheet, say, or they might have it written down on an email. They might have it in a Canva mood board presentation with clickable links. That information somewhere to get those products into design files is there. They obviously have a way that they like their proposals to look and what they want on their proposals. So it's, I think, kind of really narrowing down what it is that they want to be handing off, and as part of that, what is your process? What is your current process? What does it look like? How much of that process are you happy to delegate? How much of that do you feel comfortable delegating? That's another thing. Yes, because that's also then like another aspect of it. You've got a VA sitting here who's like, okay, yeah, great, send me the spreadsheet, send me the links, I'll get it all into design files. And if you're like, yeah, great, brilliant, just take it off my plate, run with it, like I don't have the headspace anymore to think about it, then that's a good place to be in. If you're equally kind of like, oh well, maybe just do that element of it, it's kind of the element of having to be ready, I think, to delegate and ready to get the systems and the processes in place.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I don't know about how you feel, Megan, if you're working with a client who's kind of, I don't want to use the word half-hearted, because that's not what I'm trying to say, but almost like not fully there yet to be ready to delegate. So it's almost then becomes a hindrance for you to be able to deliver and to provide support for somebody.
Yes, absolutely. And I have onboarded clients that do not have any processes in place. And I mean, not to say I can't do that, but it is a lot harder for us to work with a client that doesn't have anything in place. But so my recommendation, when you onboard a client that doesn't have anything in place, your first step is not going to be taking over the task. Your first step is going to be creating those processes, making sure that their back office is ready to begin task.
To begin delegating. Yes. And there's many ways that you can kind of work with a designer to put that in place. There's a lot of software to help with that. Whether that is I think one I know you like using a lot, Megan, is it Scribe?
Scribe is more for processes, documenting those processes, but a software that I love, and this is what I recommend to any designer I work with, Loom. Loom is a screen recorder. It records everything that you're doing on your screen, and so they're not having to actually go in and physically document their process. They can screen record that process, and then they can send it to me, and then I can do the documenting for that process.
And then that's something you can always refer back to, when you're then going back to do that proposal a second time, third time. Oh, what was it that they said about, that step? You've got it to reference back. You're not then having to questions.
Right. It's like if you didn't know how to get to my house and I'm trying to tell you and I'm screwing it up, or I just hit record and then you see all the streets that we turned down, and then you see what my house looks like. and then you can get there, you know.
Yes, that's a really great analogy. Yeah. And then, you know, you do it again to get there the next time you visit, because you're not that familiar with it. And then perhaps maybe the third time as well. But by the fourth time you visit your house, you know exactly where to go. So
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
And the same works for a VA sharing a Loom video with a designer. I do that for Heather frequently. You know, if there's something that she's needing help with or she wants me to document, I'll make a quick Loom video and then I'll share it with the team so that we're all on the same page. We all know how to perform that
I love it
process.
because I'm like, where is this button?
Yes. Yes.
There's the button. Oh, there's the
Yes.
button. Okay. Carrying on.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's a great, you know, it's a great communication tool as well.
Yes.
You know, exactly what you've just said. You know, it's not always necessarily jumping on a Zoom call. Like, you know, you're feeding back on a brief and
you
it's
have to
like,
stop what you're doing for that.
yeah,
You know,
you
you
just
have to
need
find
to,
the time and but a
you
Loom
just need to,
video, you can watching it any time.
and you just kind of need to give a little bit more description and meaning to what it is that you're kind of writing and briefing back to a client and say, you know, I've done this, I think it's what you're looking for. You know, I've kind of marked this shipping up here by this percentage and done this here over here, and you know, just kind of talking it through than necessarily just dropping all that down on a piece of paper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Loom is a good one.
And if you are out and about, maybe you're running errands and you need to direct the VA on a task, you know, you can always do that on your phone too. You can screen record the process on your phone. And I've even had to do that for clients. Like I've been out and about, but they need to know how to do something right then. So I can access everything on my phone and I'll screen record that and share it with them. So if you need something a little bit convenient, Loom is definitely a tool that you can utilize.
Yeah, I think another one, Loom is great. It's free, I think, for 5 minutes a video. Komodo is another one. That's a newer one with a K. And that I believe is free at the moment for unlimited videos. So that could be a good one to check out as well. But no, yeah, either of those are, you know, good tools to implement to help, you know, get processes out there. You know, and
I had a coach recommend to do a list, to just spend a couple of minutes, you know, maybe an hour of your time focused on what it is that you don't like to do. Like Megan said, like, I really hate, you know, having to implement all these things because it's just, it's a waste of time and someone else could be doing that. But then I love doing these parts. So these are the parts that I definitely want to keep for myself, but I don't like this aspect over here. And so you kind of create like almost like a pros and cons list of I like doing this, I don't like doing that. And then you've got something to go to a virtual assistant company and say, here are the tasks that I'm thinking about. Even if you don't have, like, I'm fully aware of all of my systems and I use Asana and I'm all buttoned up and you can just take over because I have it. Here you go. You know, you've started with something and then you can kind of move towards having those different building blocks. Like for us, we didn't have Asana in place. And this year we brought on 2 more hires. So we are, you know, between Tracy and I, and 3 teammates, were 5 people. So now, so we came up with, as Asana as a good tool for us. And Megan has been able to not just set it up for us, but teach us how to use it because, you know, we didn't know. So I think that that's been a huge help because you don't have to know everything right away and teach someone else how to do it. They probably have those skills because they're using that for other designers already, which has been amazing. The fact that you're, you know, Megan, you're so good at that. And I like lean on you for
thank you
for this. Yeah.
Knowledge of other designers. Yeah. And, you know, and the VA isn't something that, you know, it's a mix. I have designers who don't have any employees, any sort of part-time employees, full-time employees, contract employees, and it's their first kind of hire or, you know, outsource. Equally, designers who have a team of 3, 4 designers working with them, you know, but they're looking to outsource a particular element of it. And that could be, you know, the new client inquiry calls or the client onboarding. You know, I just need somebody to make sure that we're not missing leads, you know, that we're like responding within a timely manner, because I get a new client inquiry and I can't get to it for a week. So, you know, even just somebody there, just taking that, you know, inquiry and sending out our information and our brochure and scheduling a call with me and, you know, doing a pre-screen, sending a questionnaire, you know, just that step of the process. So that could have been something, coming back to your pros and cons list, Heather, that, you know, that particular designer was like, it's just something that I don't have the time to do, I'm not getting around to, but it's actually quite important for the business because they're losing, you know, potential leads here. So they've identified that as an area. That's just one example. So yeah, I think really spending that time on the front end to really kind of dive down and think, what did you say, what do you like doing, what don't you like doing, what are you comfortable delegating, you know, what is your current process for that. You know, somebody else we just onboarded last week, we're literally just helping them with their invoicing and their time billing, because they're like, I just never get round to invoicing. I'm too busy working. Like,
That's the point.
So you know, I just never have time to you know, I don't have time to track my time, and I need somebody to hold me accountable to tracking my time and billing my hours, because I get so far behind with my billing that then it's like 3 months, 3 months later, and then I feel bad that I can't bill the time because it's been so long and I'm leaving money on the table. So, you know, and literally just having somebody there just to do that, get the hours in the system, bill them out, follow up on the invoices, send the client statements, and just take over that side. So
grateful that person reached out to you, because it, you know, God, that's important.
Yes.
But you know, she's admitted that she's not great at that, and like struggling, and almost having somebody to have that accountability as well, like hound her for the hours and say, you know, and somebody else be that person following up on the invoices. You know, she's not being the bad cop all the time. It's like, you know, somebody else is there to be like, this is overdue, you should have paid last month, you know. So yeah, there's many different areas, and I think every case is different. So really kind of pinpointing, I think, that area for where you feel you need that support and what that looks like. So
yes. So, you know, knowing what to delegate, having processes in place for those tasks that you're wanting to delegate. I mean, I think those two are very important when working with a VA, and you know, you need to consider that whenever you're searching for that VA.
I mean, we touched on Asana, you know, and sort of project management, task management tools. I would say Asana is one of the more popular ones. Megan, would you, that you kind of use?
Yes, absolutely. And so design files. I don't know how many designers out there utilize design files, but I have a couple clients that you know, their design software is design files, and they have updated their system. Like you can assign tasks, you can communicate within those tasks. I mean, the project management within design files is amazing. So you know, a couple of the clients that I work with, we eliminated Asana because everything they need is within that design software. So yeah, if you're utilizing design files, then definitely check into that, because that can be your project management tool as well.
Because sometimes they can almost be, you know, the other side, and that there's too many softwares. There's too many things in the mix that kind of are being used or aren't being used. And, you know, I'm using QuickBooks for invoicing, design files for the proposals, Canva for mood board, Asana for task management, Harvest for time tracking, you know, whatever. It can go on. So that can sometimes be, from a VA's point of view, I guess, a bit scattered, like what is it that, you know, I'm doing, and where am I working, where am I doing that, you know, deliverable for you. So looking at ways to help streamline that. come in and kind of, like you just said with the design files, that task management functionality is a good one for that very reason. I think it's going to, do away with the need to have duplicates everywhere.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes. Another project management tool, I've seen several designers utilize Trello. It's not my favorite, but it is definitely a project management tool as well. Asana is probably the number one project management tool that I enjoy utilizing. But yeah, I think those three.
Visual, ClickUp is another one.
Yes, ClickUp.
Designermonday.com. I think again it all kind of comes down to personal preference. It's a bit like the design softwares, with Design Files and Studio Designer and Mydomo and
exactly
Ivy, and there's no one size fits all. I think it depends on what you're wanting to do, and a VA can make recommendations for software they've used or they know and how it works, but ultimately what works for you is kind of the decision that the client has to be kind of putting forward of, yes, we're going to go with Design Files or we're going to go with Asana. A VA can kind of make some suggestions, but ultimately that kind of lead needs to come from the client for what they're wanting to use.
Exactly. And this is something that I just thought about. So I'm currently working with a client and we are setting up her operations. We're getting everything functional so that she can have a great relationship with the VA. And I told her, I was like, you definitely need a project management tool within your business. I was like, that's going to improve the way that you and the VA work together and communicate. And my first question was, if we created a project management tool for you, will you use it? And she said, no, probably not.
No.
And so I said, okay, well, then we cannot implement that because it's not going to do any good. If you're not committed to utilizing that tool, we don't need it. So one thing that I did find out, she does have Google Workspace, and Google has Google Spaces. They offer Google Spaces, and you can actually create projects within Google Spaces. So that's another project management tool option that you can utilize as well, is within Google Workspace.
Absolutely. And I think you're right, Megan. You can't kind of force a round peg in a square hole, because with the best one in the world, if, like you said, if somebody just isn't that way inclined or that tech savvy, or isn't realistically going to be using it, then it's not in their interest. It's in nobody's interest, because it's not going to work. That isn't going to be successful. If they're seeing it as something else to do, something else to log into, more work,
right,
that goes against the whole reason of why a VA is there to help. So
exactly.
Not productive.
And not only that, but if your VA is utilizing that project management tool, then they're actually doing more work because they're frequently having to follow up with you, the designer. So yeah, it's if you're not utilizing the tool, then it's not going to help your business.
Things like you've said with Google Spaces, we have some clients who literally just have a shared Google Doc, an Excel sheet, something somewhere for the documentation. Ultimately, there needs to be something somewhere for task management, to keep everybody on the same page. Literally,
absolutely.
It comes back to that kind of communication and what is the VA doing for you? What are the deadlines? What are the priorities? What are the deliverables? So, there still needs to be something, but we accept that, for some people, that's just not going to work. So, it's all about trying to do what's going to be most successful and most productive, because, we don't want to be adding to anybody's plate. It's here to try and help and take things away.
Yes, exactly.
To note too that MC virtual assistants, they are well versed in every software that you can imagine. So if you are like, well, I only use my Doma, is that one that they know? Yes. There's like, how many people do you have working for you, and how many different softwares are they familiar with? Let's talk about that a little.
So we have 18 VAs on the team at the moment, and they're all a mix of different background, different skill sets, different software knowledge. You know, some are really great with Mydoma, but maybe have used design files before. Some may be really great with design files, and have maybe used Mydoma in the past 3 years ago with a designer, but don't know it that well. So, you know, it really kind of depends on when I speak to a designer, what they're looking for, where that area of support is. You know, is it design based? Is it help with you know, sourcing, mood boards, more of the design based task selections? Is it the admin? Is it procurement, logistics? Is it marketing? You know, what are they looking for? And then the team, we have team members, you know, in the US from the West Coast to the East Coast. So, you know, normally time difference isn't too much of an issue. VAs are very flexible with their schedules often, and, you know, will work. That's the whole beauty of being a VA. It's that flexibility, you know, to work when around their schedule for what a designer is looking for. So yeah, you know, design files, Mydoma, Studio Designer, House Pro, Ivy, Material, Programmer, you know, and there's more being released all the time. So yeah, you know, and training, that's something obviously internally that we facilitate. If, you know, anybody has, it might be that a VA is a great match for somebody, but, you know, that designer uses Mydoma and they only know Studio Designer. You know, all of these platforms do the same thing, just differently, ultimately. So, you know, if Megan, you've used Studio Designer, design, you know, if I would turn around to you and say, oh, you know, the designer, they use Design Manager, you know, and you've never used it, chances are after a couple of hours you'd be pretty good with Design Manager, because, you know, they're all much of a muchness in what they do. So, yeah.
Yes, and you have YouTube, and a lot of your design softwares, they have tutorials that you can also watch. So yeah, it's just, you know, blocking off a couple hours to learn that program, you know, and you'll be good. You'll be good.
Yeah. And again, every designer uses them differently. You know, all of these softwares, you know, some use 5% of what the software offers, some use 95% of what the software offers. So it's, again, seeing how they use it. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think, you know, the key, alongside kind of delegation and you know, operation processes, things like that, the key, I think, to working with a virtual assistant is communication. Because obviously it's virtual. So, you know, the virtual day and age, here we are today on this webinar, you know, we're doing this virtually. It's becoming much more, you know, doable than it ever was. You know, I've spoken to designers and they have full-time in-person people, full-time virtual people. Like, you know, it's totally doable, totally, you know, acceptable way of working. I think providing the communication is in place. So, Megan, what would you say, you know, you need from a client, from a communication point of view, to kind of, you know, have that successful working relationship, you know, when it comes to kind of boundaries and assumptions and
Yes. So, you know, during our onboarding call, I always like to discuss a communication, a line of communication. You know, how do you want me to communicate with you? Do you prefer email? Do you prefer text? You know, would you rather schedule a weekly call and we can connect then? You know, how am I supposed to ask questions and you provide an answer in a timely manner? Like, what is the best line of communication for you? So establishing that line of communication is always important. And then, you know, do you only work during your office hours? You know, is that the only time that you want me to contact you, is during your office hours? Let's see, what else?
I think, you know, carry on.
And then, you know, just the softwares for communication. You know, some people, they like to communicate through Slack, and, you know, So I would need to be added to that program. If you want to communicate through your project management system, like we can do that too. I would have to create an account. So establishing those lines of communication is important, especially during your onboarding call to set, the work experience on a good start.
Yeah. And what works for you, because sometimes, often designers are out in the field, they're on site visits, and more often than not, they're like, yeah, fine, fine, text me, I'm good with text. Others are like, no, I don't need more text messages, my phone gets blown up as it is. If it's not in my email in my inbox, then I'll forget. Like, I'll read it and forget it. Like, So, yeah, and I think that's key. And sometimes almost having too many lines of communication as well can be detrimental.
Yes.
As much as having, one, but it's like, yeah, okay, well, we've got Slack, we've got text, we've got email, we've got, WhatsApp, we've got Google Chat, we've got, it's like what is the preferred? And I think establishing boundaries, what are your expectations? Like, as a VA, obviously you're there to provide that client with those 20 hours a month or 10 hours a month or whatever it is of that service. But, you do have other things on apart from, that client 10 hours a month. You're not sitting there twiddling your thumbs, kind of waiting for that client. So, you obviously manage your schedule, Megan, to work with multiple clients, and, you have kind of established expectations for communication boundaries, and if I don't get back to you straight away, or it'll be within 24 hours or things like that. So how do you kind of work that from a VA's perspective on your end? How do you manage your time from a time management point of view?
Yes, so all of the designers that I work with, we all have a weekly call. It's a scheduled call, so most of my calls take place on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that is that's a great recommendation. Go ahead and schedule a weekly call between you and your VA. Try to make that same day, same time. And then my clients know, okay, Tuesdays and Thursdays, those are her days that she connects with clients. So we'll go over, some of the tasks from last week, just a quick recap, and then we'll discuss all the projects that we're working on the current week. And then my clients, I'm okay with texting. I'm okay with my clients calling me. That, not every VA is okay with that, but I am. But I do request all of my clients, if they have a task, please don't text me the task. Let's keep the task in email form, or we can add it to the project manager.
Yeah, because that's how things get lost. Again, it's kind of that communication, things can get lost. I think it's a kind of expectation on communication. I think, we've had a couple of instances where, a client will be on email and kind of, hounding for something, and then you might then get back, but then not hear from them with the feedback you need for 2 days. So,
Exactly.
it's kind of a two-way street, like sometimes, you can only provide what you can provide with the information and, the tools and things that you're being given to actually provide that service. So sometimes if you're coming up against some sort of roadblocks, for whatever reason, getting that out of the client, then, that's sometimes where we have to understand why. Is it that you're only trying to email them and they're just not getting back to you on email? Is it that, they mean they have to use Asana and they just don't want to go into Asana and give you the information that you need? And actually, if they were to just pick up the phone and call you with the information, that would be a lot easier to them. Well, okay, let's implement that then. So again, communication is key to what, how somebody likes to work, what they need from you and what you need from them to be able to successfully, make that happen. Because wires can get crossed pretty easily, if that communication isn't open, from both ends. Feedback either way, good or bad. And from a VA point of view, I might have a client saying, the VA is just not being responsive and they're not doing that task. And it's like the VA saying to me, well, I've been waiting for this information from them since Monday. Like, I can't do the task if I don't have what I need. So it's something so simple, but yeah, that's just a classic example of, for whatever reason, something breaking down there. So yeah.
And you know, bringing up that point, Melissa, so I have had conversations with designers and they tell me, you know, this VA is amazing, but I'm having these issues. And, you know, a question that I'll ask is, have you addressed this with that VA? And probably nine times out of 10, they'll tell me no. Okay, well, the VA doesn't know that they're doing something wrong or not delivering to your expectations if you don't voice that. And so I highly encourage everyone, if you're working with a VA, voice that, good or bad. Like, we have to know we have to know your expectations in order to deliver those how you would like.
Yeah. All right. I have a question. You guys have a book, a blog, something about communication that you would recommend for people to watch and listen to be a better communicator, because it's not really something that everyone is good at. And, you know, it's something that you can fine tune like any skill. So are you guys in the know on anything that would help someone?
We have a couple of tools internally, don't we, Megan? And we kind of like, that's where, you know, if as part of our process, when, you know, we're onboarding clients, as I said, you know, Megan's our client success manager. So, you know, in those early days, normally within 3 months, if there's going to be any issue, that's when they arise. You know, when somebody's starting to first work together. After that, generally speaking, it's like, okay, yeah, we've got a groove and, you know, everything's good. So, you know, we're there to help, you know, check in those early days, make sure that everything's good from the VA side as well as the client side, you know, making sure that both have what they need. And, you know, if for whatever reason there's some things emerging, at that point, that's where we're here as a team. And, you know, Megan will kind of set up calls with client to kind of say, okay, what's going on? Where's the issue? What, you know, what can we do to help this? You know, we've got some reference material. You know, is it communication? Do you need help with that? You know, do you actually need more help with what to delegate? Is it that your systems aren't in place? Is it, you know, so we're kind of there to offer support through those early days, you know, as best we can based on what's going on or what an issue might be. Yeah.
And, you know, 9 times out of 10, the issue is communication. And, you know, so once we establish a great line of communication and, you know, the expectations, then that's an easy fix.
Assumptions or expectations, or as you say, it could be that, I don't know,
a groove.
Yeah, it could be that a VA emailed a client and, you know, at the start, you know, I just as a reminder, you know, I don't work on Fridays or something. And then, you know, that client never hears from the VA on a Friday. And they're sitting there thinking, well, they're not being very responsive, you know, and yet then they're not voicing that to the VA. And yet if they did, it would be something simple as, oh, yeah, well, you know, I told you I don't work Fridays, but obviously they never read the email. So like, it's something so simple, but before you know it, those simple things can then start to snowball and become an issue when it, like you said, Megan, it really is just often down to communication.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, and you know, coming to tips, you know, for you know, transparency, open, don't assume anything. You know, I think from a VA's point of view as well, you know, always kind of following up to make sure that message, whatever it was, did get, the client does know that, you know, making sure that there's no assumption just because they've declined the calendar invite, the client knows that the meeting is cancelled. Like, follow up. Like, you know, I can't make that meeting on Monday because I've got a doctor's appointment. You know, we need to reschedule, whatever it is. Don't just assume because they've declined the calendar invite that means it's done. So I think, you know, don't make assumption. Over communication, I think in the early days, is always better than under communicating, for sure. You know, as you get to know each other's working styles, and again, everybody's different. Some people are always on the text, you know, others not so much. So I think a VA has to know your style and how you like to communicate as well, and that, you know, that can take time. So yeah, weekly calls, bi-weekly calls, face-to-face calls are always nice, in this in the virtual
Right.
world, to actually see people.
Yes.
We do encourage that. Equally understand that not everybody has the I say the time to do it, but then that's the whole point of bringing on a VA, is to help you. So again, it kind of comes back to that being dedicated to put the time in the early days, and make the time for that weekly call, even if it's just 20 minutes, just to have that face to face. Okay, yeah, I'm here, and what do we need this week? What do we need to get achieved? So yeah, it's important to help establish that connection as well.
Yeah.
Yes,
And I
absolutely.
personally, like, we've gone from having one virtual assistant to now having three that work for us, and plus there's me and my partner. So like communicating just between the two of us, like those, we have established a Monday at 10 o'clock call between me and my business partner Tracy, like from the beginning. And it is imperative. Like we get so much feedback from each other on where we should be focused, what needs to get done, what's looming. And you have a maybe something by your desk that's just a written out, like what needs to get done. But then when you have the conversation with someone, it's like the light bulb goes off and you're like, oh, that didn't happen. And this needs to, and it's time for that. So it's so like neat to have that communication. And then and because we are a very remote kind of company where everyone is in their own little bubble of like, we all live so far away, it's nice to have this, like the conversation face to face in a Zoom call. And you feel like, they're really part of your team more than just a voice on a phone call or an email once in a while. And then for our team meetings, we've definitely started to feel like, in the beginning, it was kind of, I don't want to say hard. It wasn't hard. It was just, it's all new and you're figuring it out as you go, and it's getting better. And then you feel like, okay, well, now they're so good with this task. I can see that there's this other task that I'm like tortured by on a regular basis. And they would be totally cool with being able to, one, handle that, take it off my plate and do a great job on it. So yeah. So as time goes on, I've seen like more things as, as I'm doing them, where I'm like, Megan should be doing this. And I should have Linda do this part. And then, so it grows over time, it gets more comfortable, and there becomes a rhythm where, you don't need an hour to talk about something every single week. Right. You can just have, as long as you have an agenda and just a couple of bullet points written down, you're not going to I totally forgot that. And like you spent 45 minutes chatting it up about different things. But if you just had like a couple bullet points of like, we need to talk about this, this, and this, and then as you're talking, another thing comes up, totally fine, add it in there. But to have that agenda has been really helpful, because, you can spend a lot of time in meetings. You can spend a lot of time in email. You can spend a lot of time in different softwares, like the time can get like suckage, where it's just sort of like takes from you, and that's not the point. But if you have some boundaries, some parameters, some agenda, and better communication, where you've created a safe space and you're like, I can tell you that I wasn't 100% happy with something, or I wish it was a little different, like then you are getting better results in what you're able to do, and they're understanding, oh, you wanted it more like this, and next time, because a virtual assistant, it wants to please you, they want to do a good job on something. So to give them the right tools to do that, it, helps both of you. And it's a process, and you definitely, I feel like I'm definitely more comfortable with it. And I'm like, I don't know what we would do without it, honestly. Like, you can't go anywhere, Megan. So
I don't plan on it. So I'm here.
But like you said, Heather, it's a journey, it's a process. That didn't happen overnight. and when you're talking of help, whether that be 10 hours, I think Megan does around 15 hours a month for you. That's not a lot of time in the scheme of things.
Right.
You guys have worked together for several months now, quite a while. So, that time has built up. When you think if you have an employee or somebody part-time in the office, the number of hours that you have them you would have them, and to build up that rapport and that trust and that relationship in an office, you probably in 1 week would do what you would do in 4 months with a virtual assistant. So it's kind of, it's accepting that it is a process, that takes time, putting the time in.
Sure, you would bond better, but there'd be a lot of wasted time too, because I've had it.
Yes.
It's like, I don't know what you should do. How about go play with the memo sample, see if there's anything discontinued, and it's like, it's busy work that didn't need to happen. But if I'm trying to fill someone's time because you've hired them for a full day, that's also work.
But those weekly calls that you have definitely help with, and I think it's accountability as well for like you as a client, because you're bringing us in to help get something done. It might be that you've had this client welcome packet sitting on your desk for the last 6 months, and you're like, I really want to get this in place, and it's like, it's a Canva document, whatever it might be. If you have that meeting to review that document on that Monday morning with the VA, then it's going to keep it moving. If you cancel that call because something else has come up, then that welcome packet is still going to be sitting on the desk in 6 months' time. So it's like, I think it helps as well to provide some for the client to provide the momentum and the accountability, and to keep things moving for you as a VA. So you
absolutely.
Yes. I mean, you know what they say, teamwork makes the dream work, right? So, you have to have a functional team, and there are a few steps to make that happen, but communication is definitely the key to success.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Good or bad, like you said, and we all have personal lives, we all have things happen, as well, like life goes on and other things, and it's like, okay, if your client doesn't know that, I don't know, your grandfather passed away, or whatever that might be, that we're all human, we're all people. Let them know, like, if you're not as responsive as you would have been that week, then they understand, like,
yes.
And vice versa, on the client side. We've just onboarded a client who, is waiting on some news that potentially might not be great, to do with some surgery with a family member, and I might not be as responsive as I would hope to be with the whole onboarding process and all of that. Great, we know, like, we're now not going to be thinking, oh well, they're not serious, or they're not getting back to us, or we understand. So I think it just comes down to transparency and communication.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I think they were the kind of key areas we were covering off with, sort of delegation, processes, software, communication. If anybody has any questions, we're absolutely kind of here to take anything. So feel free to shoot them in the chat if anybody has anything they want to ask. Megan, I think, as a roundup, would you say maybe what has been your most successful sort of VA partnership, and why was that, and what has been the least successful and why? That's probably a bit of a
I would say the most successful, so as you know, the clients that I've worked with for you, I've had them for almost 3 years now, I think. Well, the first couple. And so I would say, they were ready for a VA. They were ready to delegate. And, the first couple months, they were like, okay, this is what I want to delegate. Let's create a process. And then, we'll check in every month to make sure everything's flowing well. And, after we got everything set up, after we got all the processes in place, and probably a good 4 months after all of those steps took place, finally the designer was like, okay, you just handle all of my purchasing, all of my procurement, everything is on you. And then I would just update her on the items, you know, that have been delivered or they're expected for install number 1, you know. And I feel like where she was able to allow me to take charge of that task, it worked in my benefit because I created my own system that works for me, and I'm able to keep her informed, and I'm able to make sure all the deliverables meet her expectations. So I would say that's definitely something I enjoy when a client's able to allow me to take charge of that task. Let's see. I'm trying to think of something. I would say something that has held back for effective work relationship would be a designer that maybe, you know, they're ready to delegate, but they still want to take ownership of that task and not fully hand it over. You know, I get it. It's hard to have someone come into your business and take all the tasks that you originally do, and you know, you want everything done right. So I get it. But in order for that VA to be effective, like you have to be willing to let go of that task. And so I find that that's probably been a moment that, you know,
Yeah.
that I didn't really, I mean, it's okay, but I really didn't prefer that way. You know, I would rather have ownership of the task.
Yeah.
Kind of being set up for success or set up
Exactly.
for fail, and no one's trying to do that, you know, intentionally on a conscious level.
Right.
It is hard
Yes.
to say, I'm going to let you do this. It's important, but I think you have to, if you're that kind of person that really loves the control of it and feels like giving it away, you know, things could go wrong. If you are nervous about it, you have to do some testing, like send somebody something that's maybe not like top priority and so important, you know, see how they do with it, give feedback. Like you don't have to tell them they're terrible. You can say,
Yes.
it was more like this, and I would prefer, like, there are communication words that are softer than I hate this, you know.
Yes.
But if you don't tell them why you weren't totally happy, then they're never going to be able to get to the better place of improving on it. And yeah, so that's, I feel like it's a muscle that you have to flex every once in a while and get better at that, of not just the delegate the task, but then communicate as to why the task could have been better or what you were expecting instead.
Yes. And you know, anytime a designer provides feedback to me, like I never look at it as, oh my gosh, like this is horrible. No, I look at it as improvement. We all can use improvement. So allowing a designer to openly communicate with me on her expectations, like that's amazing. Like that's a great functional working relationship.
Yeah. That's a good point, Megan. You know, to feel comfortable to be able to kind of do that and take the feedback on board. And, you know, you might have a designer that only wants it done that way. So you do it that way because that's how you do it for that other client. But actually they're like, oh my God, no, I hate that. Like, yeah, I wouldn't, you know, like proposals, the clients, I have one client who like loves all the detail, like they want everything in there, because, you know, they don't want their client to turn around and be like, well, you know, you didn't put the dimension on the proposal and have the comeback. Equally, I have another client who's like, no, less is more. Don't give them detail. Like, you know,
right.
don't give them too much information. So
Yeah,
it's literally like, you know, it's literally like old bronze coffee tables, done. You know, they'll go and Google it, they'll go and get it, so they'll go and find out where, you know. So two very different perspectives. You know, neither are wrong. Right. But like, you know, if I didn't know that she didn't want all the information, I would do the proposal with all the information, and then she's like, oh my God, no, like that's not what I want. So
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so do we have any questions? It's a great opportunity to ask away.
Lynn, I did post the Loom link in our Q&A chat, so you should be able to access that.
Okay, let's see. Oh, you know what? I think it's
There
set.
we go.
Yeah, hold on. Let me set it to everyone.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. You have it now.
It's funny because I don't see it. Does everyone see it? Could you let us know?
I see that. Yeah. So the startup plan, yeah. So in terms of support, we start at 10 hours a month. And we go through to, sort of 50, 60. To be honest, much more than that. We do have a couple of clients who are kind of on 60, but much more than that, you start getting into kind of part-time hours. And, often that then comes to the point where it's not cost effective, or, chances are if you're needing a VA for 60 hours a month, then really you're probably then looking at a part-time employee, and maybe a VA isn't the right sort of choice. So the starter plan is for 10 hours. I would say our average client is around 20 to 30 hours a month. 20 hours definitely is a good kind of start point. It's an hour a day, but again, it comes back to comfort levels. It comes back to what it is that you're looking to outsource. It might be that you just start with that one particular thing, whether it be just creating proposals or creating mood boards or sending the newsletters or whatever it be. So that, and then build from there, once you kind of have the VA, and like Heather said, kind of get used to working with them. So I can pop a link to our website in there. So yeah, and I think Heather, you share this afterwards, don't you?
I do.
You share
And I
the
will
recording with our
recording's going to go out to everyone who registered, and then also a link to MC Virtual Assistant so you can find out more.
Hey, Melissa, there's another question from Taylor.
Yeah. Please explain how the process would work of entering billing a designer's time for invoicing. I keep catching track on chicken scratch notes and enter at the end of the month. Well, several. I mean, I have a client who literally does exactly the same, and she just has post-it notes, and she will text me at the end of every month each image of each client. But you know what? It works. Like for her, coming back to what we were talking about earlier, round peg in a square hole. For her, it works. So it's the easiest way for her to get the information to me. So fine, send me the text message with the pictures on, not a problem. And then I just literally copy them, input them manually into House, and generate the invoice that way. There's time tracking softwares. Harvest is one. Clockify, I think, is one of your favorites. Megan, it's free.
Yes, I absolutely love Clockify. You can download detailed reports. And you can also, like, all of your descriptions, what you were working on for that project during that time, all of that's on the detailed report. So yes, I love Clockify. You can download it on your cell phone and your PC, MacBook, whatever you're using.
Yeah, I was always guilty of the paper, because for me to remember to open the software, like I've already started the task. It's like the squirrel's running around. we're just trying to hold it together. So, scrap paper around somewhere. I will write down like started blah blah blah, and yeah. I'm guilty of taking a photo and sending it to someone.
Yeah, and that's what worked. Like we said, we can make it work. And even if it's a case of, okay, well, let's start with that. Let's just get you comfortable with the process. Like send the time. Let me get it in. Let me get the invoices out. Right. Once we then are promoting,
start using Clockify.
Yeah, then let's in month 3, right? Should we look at Clockify now? Like we've got the process. We know what we're doing. Like, should we see if we can improve this? So. Again, they say Rome wasn't built in a day and all that. So it's a journey of things that can be. Yeah.
So there's a question: could Clockify link to Studio?
Don't believe so.
So
Studio
I just
designer.
responded.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't think that any of the time tracking would connect with design software unless that design software has time tracking. I mean, that would take a little bit of research to find out to give you a solid answer.
If they could do an
But
integration.
you can download a report and attach the report on your invoice as an attachment.
Yeah, so that could be a way to do it if you were doing it in Clockify and then you just literally did a line item, design fees for October.
Yes.
In whatever your, QuickBooks or whatever it is, and then just attach that attachment.
Exactly. Yes. And I did that several of times. Like any clients that want to know the time and how much time was spent on a task, like I can download that report, attach it in QuickBooks.
Because again, some VA time is billable as well. So, if we have VAs who are doing procurement, tracking, some clients charge, fees for that, design support, sourcing, mood boards, all things that would be going, against a fee or hourly or however you work it. So, our VAs can also kind of be tracking time, in Studio Designer or House or, wherever your systems are as well, Excel spreadsheet, whatever works.
Yes, and that's one thing, Melissa, the VAs, we do, when we clock our time, we do include detailed information. So if we're working on a specific project, that information will be on your invoice.
Yeah, it's been helpful. I gotta say, when I look at that now, I'm thinking in terms of next year. I'm thinking in terms of, okay, so we're spending whatever, let's say 2 hours a month on newsletters. So I know to budget for, this much time and even this much money for the expense of what that marketing would be. And we did it with our events that we had, which was the first time we'd ever done any kind of event for High Point or for Luann Live. So tracking how long something took with what my virtual assistant spent on phone calls, emails, whatever, then for next year I can think, well, I might do another event and it's going to take 30 hours of X amount of time to put all of that into place. And then it really is informative and helpful when you're thinking about the following year and future projects.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that goes along with your budgeting for the following year and your expectations, like how many members you need on board. And yeah, I mean there's a lot whenever you're reviewing those detailed invoices that you can utilize in your business for the following year.
Okay, any more? I think we've entered everything that was open.
Taylor says thank you. All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I will just thank you all for being here, and I will send this recording out to everybody. This was really great. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Thank everybody.
Thank you, Heather and Melissa.
Yeah, learn something. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, ladies. Pleasure to be here again. And yes, have a great rest of the day, everybody.
You too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.